Coming to you, pre-recorded from Casa de Regis in Culver City, California, it's the Reggie N Regis Podcast!
And welcome to episode 11 of the Reggie N Regis Podcast. I am your co-host, Reggie Bobrin. To my left is my compadre, Regis.
Yes, Regis, one name, like Madonna or Cher, but younger and way less talented.
Brother, the last dance has come and gone.
Yeah, it only seems like yesterday that we did episode 4, which was 7 weeks ago, which was our recollection of the 90s Bulls as we experienced it growing up. And now, 7 weeks later, we have 10 episodes that encapsulated kind of what happened when the championship season was going on and, of course, everything that led up to it. And today we're going to break down how it's altered our perception of that team, if at all.
Yeah, it's hard to believe 5 weeks is coming on. I mean, it's like, I remember the anticipation of episode 1. I mean, everybody and their mother was just like, holy God, like, like you had celebrities, you had, if you, like on Instagram or Facebook, it was just constant nonstop comments about episode 1 and 2, which I get. Actually, don't you have a message to our listeners?
Yes, obviously. Of course, we are still kind of going through this pandemic and its fallout right now, so we hope everybody is staying safe, keeping their sanity. We know this is Memorial Day weekend. We know this time when a lot of you would be getting together, having barbecues, meeting up at bars, basically kicking off your summer. So I know some places you can kind of start to do that. I know other places like California where we are, we're still kind of limited in that regard. But we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully we can get there soon. Everybody just kind of keep your heads up.
Words to live by. Good job. Anyway, so yes, as we're going to just kind of do, not a deep dive, but we're going to kind of break down kind of what we thought was the most interesting parts and pieces of, the entirety of The Last Dance. The winners, the losers, just your final thoughts on this. I mean, it definitely, for me, it lived up to the hype. I was thoroughly entertained throughout each episode. A lot of things that I learned about, a lot of things that I kind of knew already regarding Michael Jordan, regarding those Chicago Bulls teams. But there was a lot of shade being thrown at this. Well, it's not a documentary. It's a Jordan production. Let's call it what it is.
Thank you. I was just about to make that point. Yeah, it's a Jordan production. When I was kind of going over my notes for this, I came across something that I thought was kind of obscure, but it kind of relates to this. If you remember the show Sports Night that was on ABC about 20 years ago?
It was like the mid-90s?
Yeah. It was the late 90s, early 2000s. It had Felicity Huffman before she was on Desperate Housewives, and a bunch of no-names outside of that. But the premise of the show was that it was this low-level cable network that was doing their version of Sports Center, and they were trying to compete with them and all the foibles involved and everything involved with that. So they had an episode in their second season called The Sweet Smell of Air. It aired January 25th of 2000, in which Michael Jordan's people come to them and offer them the opportunity to get an exclusive interview with him. Of course, this low-rate network thinks, oh, this is going to be our opportunity to really break through. But Jordan's people set all kinds of conditions about what they can and can't ask. It's basically supposed to be like a promotional ad for his new cologne. And basically what that episode did was predict the editorial control that Jordan would have over this Last Dance piece.
Now, I've seen a few interviews with the director, Jason Eyre. I mean, he's very complimentary of Michael. He didn't, not that, I don't think he'd go on a rampage and say, oh, Michael is this and this and that and that. But I couldn't imagine that couldn't have been a very easy process. Jordan had full control, full autonomy of everything on there. And I'm pretty sure there was more than a few nights in the editing room where it's just like, okay, MJ wants us to change this, so let's just do it.
Oh, I'm sure that happened. Because if you remember, Adam Silver, who's now the NBA commissioner, he was the head of NBA entertainment at the time this footage was captured.
Yes, yeah, and back in 97,
back in 97.
Yes, he was.
And Jordan, of course, the league's biggest brand at the time, so he had all the power to wield that he could and did. He basically said that footage could not be used without his express permission. Not the Chicago Bulls, not Jerry Reinsdorf's, not Phil Jackson's, Michael's.
Yeah, I mean, talk about power. Yeah. That is power.
And you talk about the NBA being a star-driven league today, it was the same thing back in the 90s.
Okay, so I guess with that being said, let's kind of break it down a little bit. Now, a lot of the things that I like, you saw some behind the scenes footage of Michael. I love the first episode because you saw Michael as a college kid. Like that letter to his mom when he's just like, can you send me, I know I only have $20 in my bank account. Can you send me some money and some stamps?
Yeah, that was the most human moment I think Michael had in the entire 10 hours.
And you saw Jordan's reaction when he saw it because he didn't know. I mean, in his reaction, it's just like, it humanized him. And I almost hate to say that. Because Jordan's kind of this godlike figure. And, it kind of like brought him down. He's a struggling college kid, I guess like we were.
Exactly. Like when we were in college, we wrote that letter or had that phone call with our moms.
Exactly. Oh, many times.
Yeah. No, I remember my mom sending me a care package of, protein bars and stamps and just other essentials. I'm like, thanks, Mom.
Even after college, I'll admit that. So anyway, but it was I like the kind of the background, with Scotty and then with Phil and Dennis Rodman, like the main stars. I liked pretty much everything in its entirety. We pretty much know who the villains were going to be in this particular production. Krause, Isaiah, I guess Reinsdorf to a certain extent, although he wasn't vilified as much. But, people are going to look to him like, wait, you're the owner. You control. You make the final call.
Well, there's one big difference between Reinsdorf and Krause. I know this is going to sound morbid. Reinsdorf was available to defend himself. Krause died back in 2003.
Unfortunately, yeah. I would have loved to, and I've even heard Jason Errr talk about that. Like, he would have obviously loved to have Jerry Krause and get his opinions because, these are all things that we can kind of put together, but we don't really know what happened behind the scenes. This documentary or production was able to show us like a lot of things that like what we thought maybe sometimes didn't kind of quite match what what reality was. So I like that. I liked it from that aspect. I love the obviously look the Jordan chewing out his teammates. I always heard about the Steve Kerr thing, and I think it was a Sports Century Michael Jordan one. But just to kind of go into a little bit more detail about that, Scott Burrell,
right.
The beef he had with Horace Grant, it was pretty interesting. And look, the one thing I will say about this particular production was Jordan was very candid. He was very forthcoming. He didn't run from anything. He didn't run from the gambling. He didn't run from his father's death. He kind of really expressed himself very well. So that was a big win for me.
Exactly. Like Jordan could have done more to kind of put himself over and kind of enshrine himself as the GOAT, if you will, in a lot of people's minds. Because there's one takeaway that, I got from this amongst many others, is that the people who thought Jordan was the GOAT going in, obviously those same people are going to think Jordan is the GOAT afterward. And the people who didn't think so, their minds aren't going to be changed either because, let's face it, Jordan kind of came down as this somewhat dictatorial leader at times.
I've heard many analysts or sports personalities who have covered this, covered sports for more than half a century. Basically, Jordan's a dick.
Yeah. So not just in sports, this happens in life as well. Sometimes you run into people who are so focused on results and winning that even if you do win, it kind of takes away from the experience given what you have to sacrifice to do so. And some people are built like that, and sometimes you bring in people that maybe aren't as built like that. Tom Brady and Bill Belichick are a great example, right? How many guys on the Patriots have, come there to come win a ring, experience the process, get burnt out, and then want to go somewhere else? Look at Chris Long or LeGarrette Blount or guys like that. Right.
And I guess in relating to the Bulls, how, you had, and we don't know, obviously, the whole story, but we've seen certain things where, Jordan would ride certain players. We don't know how many guys he's gotten rid of. Or I don't think Jordan was that guy. Jordan was more or less that guy is if this guy's not up on that level, just sit him on the bench and, bring in the guys who can. But, when you see Horace Grant who left, and apparently, there's a few guys who played on that, especially the first repeat, who are not very happy with the way this production went down, being Horace Grant, Scottie Pippen,
Craig Hodges.
But Craig Hodges always had a bit of an issue with Jordan. Craig Hodges is kind of a militant guy to begin with. He was kind of like in the 90s. So I kind of expected
it. Louis Farrakhan type. Yeah.
But, obviously we're starting to hear, if you look on on YouTube or social media, these guys are coming out. Not Scottie, but Horace is doing a lot of interviews, basically telling his side of the story. Craig Hodges has more than one or two interviews. It's pretty interesting. And I kind of expected some backlash, but not to this extent. Isaiah is still talking about,
I kind of expected some of this because when you're as great as Jordan is and as committed to winning as Jordan was, that's going to rub some people the wrong way.
Right. I'm pretty sure in 20 years, if they do a LeBron deep dive, a guy like, let's say, Mario Chalmers, who was his whipping boy during LeBron's 4 years with the Heat. And I was there. And anytime Mario Chalmers did anything wrong on the court, LeBron would give him a look like, are you fucking kidding me? Like really? And technically, it wasn't really even LeBron's team. It was Dwayne Wade's team. But LeBron was just very hard.
No, it was LeBron's team.
Yeah, it was
Dwayne Wade let it become LeBron's team.
I think Wade was still technically the leader. It was LeBron's team from a talent aspect. But
okay, I'll give you that.
But I'm pretty sure it's not easy to play with a lot of different athletes. I heard even my guy Derek Jeter wasn't really the warmest guy. I heard actually Alex Rodriguez was a better teammate. He's more of a mentor. Derek didn't talk to you if you didn't have status. So my point being is, when you're on that level and you attain that much greatness, you're not going to be warm and fuzzy with anybody. When I saw the interaction with Scott Burrell. Is this Scott Burrell? Scott Burrell. Yeah. I don't know. It's called Scott Rowland, baseball player.
The third baseman who was on every team in the NL.
Right. The interaction that he had with Scott Burrell, I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, it was kind of like one of those things where it's Jordan's ripping him. He's kind of teasing him a little bit. I'm not sure he's trying to motivate him, but he was, again, I'm pretty sure this happens in most locker rooms.
Oh yeah, it happens in every locker room.
I know for a fact, Kobe. I mean, they had a behind this thing with Kobe in practices, and this guy's firing elbows. He's calling his teammates Charmin, soft as Charmin tissue paper, and this and that. These kind of things happen. I think because Mike has this image of he's never said anything controversial. I mean, he has a couple of controversies, but he's never been that one to take that verbally, just kind of speak out against anything. So, they see him kind of like, he's this beloved figure. But then you see this side, he's calling him a bitch and he's calling him a hoe and he's saying he's an alcoholic. I mean, but it was all in fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's within the locker room. And that's the thing. That's the thing Jordan, I think, did better than anybody. He said, even if there was dissension within the Bulls, he kept it within the locker room, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, he had his stuff that he had to deal with, outside of the game, and I thought this production covered it really well. For example, the public's perception of his quote-unquote gambling problem. Yeah. There's that, and then, of course, his beef with Isaiah Thomas, which I thought was documented really well.
But that we knew. I mean, that we knew already. I mean, I can't believe it's almost been 30 years.
And that's the other goal of this production, I think, given the timing of it, was that it introduces Jordan's greatness to a younger audience, younger than we are, that maybe would have been too young or maybe wouldn't even been born yet to see Michael Jordan in his element in real time.
Exactly. It gives the millennials, I guess,
I'm technically a millennial.
Well, I mean, you know what I mean. Like the LeBron honks, the LeBron honks who were like, LeBron is the greatest thing and Jordan is just this over. It gave a glimpse. I mean, at least the people who never watched Jordan play in his prime of just what this man was about, how great he was, and the impact that he had on the world.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, not just the NBA, but the world.
And the middle episodes did this really well in terms of him being merchandised by Gatorade and Nike, and amongst others, as extensively as he was, along with him being part of the Dream Team. And that, I think, really completed David Stern's goal of introducing basketball to a global audience.
Oh, of course. It took it to another level. Anything after 1992 in Barcelona, just the NBA I mean, if it was a stock, it just shot up just through the roof.
Look at the quality of international players that came in after that Olympics.
Exactly. And, but I want to get too far off point. I mean, so we know the Isaiah Thomas thing. Horace Grant, obviously, look, and Horace has spoken about it. Basically, yeah, it did happen where Jordan basically tried to tell a stewardess not to give him food. But basically, Horace basically said, look, man, I stand up for myself. I look at Michael and I'm just like, you're not going to take my food away from me. And basically, I guess in this past week, basically said he confronted Michael about that on the plane. And basically, Jordan didn't do anything. Now, I've heard Jordan had run-ins with guys like Bill Cartwright. If you ever heard anything about Bill Cartwright, he's like the nicest guy ever. Exactly. And Jordan was just like ripping him in practice. And Cartwright basically said, if you ever speak to me like that again, I'm going to break your legs. So, and again, these kind of things happen. So we know about Horace Grant. Obviously, he left for Orlando in 1994 to play with Penny and Shaq.
And he was a lot happier when he was there.
Now, here is the main one that I got from, and the guy who I don't feel quite as sorry for him, but I kind of feel like he was done a little wrong, and that's his running mate, Scottie Pippen.
Of course.
Scottie did not come out of this looking all that good. Now, a few of them are very self-inflicted. We all know about the 1.5 seconds down 0-2 against the Knicks in 1994, where Tony Kukoc hit that game winner.
Yeah, but here's the thing about that game, though. One, it was in the 1994 playoffs. Jordan was off playing baseball in Birmingham. Secondly, the Bulls won anyway. And thirdly, it didn't really tarnish his legacy too much because the Bulls ended up losing the series because the Knicks showed up at the end.
Well, there was a generous Hugh Hollins call in Game 5 that, Hubert Davis 4-point play, basically, which was kind of a BS call. But anyway, that happens. But the reason why I mentioned that particular one, because as you mentioned, Jordan didn't really have to go too much in the production, I should say, didn't have to go too much into that. When I remember seeing it and then hearing about it from the press. When you actually hear the audio of Phil Jackson saying, "Scottie, are you in?" And Scottie's like, "No, I'm out." That says a lot more. It resonated a lot more with me just hearing the actual, hearing the actual words of him saying, "Oh no, I'm out." And then how, teammates and Steve Kerr, he even said, Scottie quit on us. He's our leader. He quit on us. And I remember Scottie took a big beating going into Game 4. He showed up, the Bulls won. And then, but the thing that he kind of shot himself in the foot is he said he would do it again if he had the chance. And that was kind of like, that's why I'm like, okay, I don't think they should have really made too much of that.
I know, yeah.
But then Scottie's got to know better to be like, you're not going to score any points with that.
Exactly.
With that comment.
And they also highlighted the Game 7 against the Pistons, in which he had the migraine. And made a big deal about that. Now, obviously, neither you nor I nor probably anybody listening to this podcast is going to know what it's like to be a star professional athlete in a high-pressure situation, in a playoff game where there's a lot of money and prestige on the line and things like that. So obviously, that's not an experience that we can relate to. But as you said, Scottie should have been smart enough just not to say that to the media, because there's some things you just kind of got to keep in.
Right. And in 1997, when he, I guess, delayed his back surgery and he like flat out just said it, like, I didn't want to fuck up my summer, so I delayed my surgery. And I'm just like, wait a minute, dude, you're coming off 2 championships in a row, going for 3. And it's just like, that's something I remember Shaq pulled. And this was like Shaq at the end of his Laker tenure where he didn't give a fuck. And he gave that beautiful comment of, I got hurt on work time, I'll rehab on work time. But, Scottie's, I always thought was more of a professional from that mindset. So when, he definitely didn't score any points with that comment as well. But I did come out of this kind of feeling a little bad for him because, look, he's the greatest. He's the greatest Robin, I guess.
I'll give you that.
In
he's the greatest number 2.
Yeah, he's the greatest number 2. Him and Michael fit perfectly. And they always had a pretty good relationship. And I kind of hate to see, Scottie get thrown. Like Isaiah, I get. Horace, I can understand why. But Scottie, I'm just kind of like, you guys, like this is the greatest duo ever in NBA history. And I'm just like, oh man, like, Michael kind of dogged him a little bit.
One thing I will give Jason here in the productions credit for is that they gave reasons for Pippen to maybe have felt the way that he did.
Yes.
Because going into that last season, he was the 122nd highest paid player in the league. To put that in perspective, that would have meant there were 30 teams in the league at the time, or maybe even less than that, take their starting 5s. He would have been almost last amongst people who were, on the starting 5 amongst NBA starters. And this guy was, a surefire Hall of Famer even at this point. Secondly, you could see over the course of that last season, even though they won 62 games, even though they were the top seed in the East, they were beaten and broken down.
Yeah, they were running on fumes.
Exactly. Pippen would have been running on fumes even if he didn't have back issues.
Exactly. I mean, Well, Scotty's game, I always go, Scotty's game could have transitioned to anything. He wouldn't have been quite the athlete that he was, just like, slant, or taking it to the basket, attacking the rim and whatnot. But, his game was perfect because, he gives you a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. If you put him in the right system, he'll flourish. But they were definitely running on fumes from that standpoint. Jerry Krause, I mean, as we mentioned before, it's just like we obviously knew that he was going to take a beating. I felt kind of, I don't want to say bad, but like he obviously he's not here to defend himself. I would have loved to have seen his opinions on what he thought, just like of Michael, of the team, and like we can all just speculate what we kind of saw. And obviously we knew that he was flirting with Tim Floyd. He was grooming him to be the next head coach of the Chicago Bulls. But I would have loved to have been there to just kind of get his point of view from what he saw.
Yeah, well, here's the thing that I think not a lot of people are paying attention to. I said this on Twitter the other day. Krause built the team that won 6 championships.
Exactly.
Like he drafted Jordan number 3 in 1984.
No. That was Rothorn.
That was Rothorn. Okay, so that was before.
He came in 85. He came in
85. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Didn't do my research on that. Sorry, guys. So again, Jordan was drafted number 3 overall by Rod Thorne, exceeds expectations as a rookie. But still, for those next few years, that team hadn't really gelled. They don't get Pip until 87. He takes a few years to finally grow up and become, that major NBA player. They kind of, give the Pistons a run for their money in the couple years that they win their titles, but they didn't really come to fruition until that 1990-1991 season, until Krause had time to build the team.
Yeah.
Which is why I think Krause's comment in there that said, organizations win championships, I thought was very important. Now, if he was smart, playing to all the Jordan fans, he could have said, it's like, yeah, organizations win championships, but it helps when that organization has the best player on the planet.
And a great team around them as well.
If he would have said that, he wouldn't have taken any shit whatsoever.
Exactly. I heard a great, I forgot who made this statement, but it's like Krause wanted more credit than he deserved, but he doesn't get the credit that he, something like that he deserves. Actually.
No. He wanted more credit than he got.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Nice pickup.
Yeah.
But you got what I was saying though. But it was, and it's a perfect statement because it's exactly true. I mean, you can't say, organizations win championships. It is. But players have to go out there and produce. You know what I'm saying? Like you can
and they have to learn how to work together.
We've seen many great teams that were put together in all annals of sports that don't win. Players have to go out there and coaching, Phil Jackson. Yeah, obviously, it's all a big mix. It's a big gumbo, a big bowl of gumbo. And, I feel kind of like I would have loved to have heard his opinions on everything, but obviously that was not to be. Let's talk about like some brighter notes. What were some of the more memorable kind of like fun things that you learned about from this documentary that you didn't know about?
Well, I'll start with something that not necessarily something I didn't know about, but something actually I thought was kind of reiterated. Nobody, and I mean nobody, understands Dennis Rodman whatsoever. And I love that about the guy.
Yeah, Rodman was, it's funny. His first 2 years with the Bulls, he kind of was I mean, I know he kicked some guy in Minnesota. I was out of frustration. I'm not saying that it was justifiable, but, he did it. But, you could tell that last season, he was just like, dude, like, I'm not mentally in it.
And they let him take a break of his own accord mid-season while Pippen was still coming back from his back surgery.
Yeah, I mean, he was acting out a little bit.
And mind you, this was after the Bulls started, I think 9-9 or something like that. They had a rough start to that 97-98.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, so obviously, in hindsight, we see how well the Bulls gelled as the season went along. They still get top seed in the East, but allowing your greatest defensive player and rebounder to take that time off of his own accord just because he feels like he needs the rest when the Bulls are in the position that they're in, with the age that some of these people are, was a huge risk for Phil Jackson to allow.
And even Dennis took advantage of that because Michael had to go chase his ass in the hotel, and basically that whole story with Carmen Electra looks in the peephole, sees Michael Jordan runs under the couch. Now you said she was naked, and I was like, that was just like, well,
that would have been worth the flight alone.
And then Michael goes into Dennis's room and then grabs him, and then they start doing. I guess before practice they would do these kind of sprints, and then basically just like even Rodman, who knows how hungover he was, and apparently Rodman's a big kamikaze guy.
No, they showed him drinking kamikazes in the middle of doing lat pull downs.
Yeah, and then he they started doing sprints, and I guess it was just like somebody has to take a lead. I forgot exactly how it went, but he said Dennis, as soon as he hit the ground, as soon as he hit the court, he just was just balls out, and that's who Dennis was. You didn't have to do. He could be a bit of a loop sometimes, but then when he knew he was professional when he was on the court. He knew exactly what his role was, and when he's in that like that NBA arena, he's gonna perform
exactly,
even in practice. And nobody's ever really spoken badly about him as a practice player. He's always been a guy who shows up and just kind of does his work, and then and his off time does what he wants to do.
I was just gonna say, if you want a corroboration of how hard he worked in practice, watch the Bad Boys documentary they did about the Pistons.
Oh, that was a good one too.
Yeah, that was a really good one because, of course, the tie back to Isaiah Thomas, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
A lot of what was addressed over that run with them was addressed in that documentary as well. But yeah, they said Rodman, especially in his early years, was one of the hardest workers on the court.
Obviously. Look, you don't win. He's won 7 or 8 NBA rebounding titles. He's been twice Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he was a guy who was constantly. And look, I would want Dennis Rodman on my team. I remember Bob Knight. This was I don't know, maybe like 1999. He's just like, like Rodman might be a bit of a clown, but I would take 11 Dennis Rodmans on my team because he does what you need to do to win.
And to think, he goes from being drafted out of NAIA Southeast Oklahoma State University in 1986 in the second round, in 86, to in 98, possibly 1998, having one of the best years any guy could ever ask for.
Yeah, Carmen, I always forget like how hot Carmen Electra was.
This was when she was doing Baywatch. She had just finished up Singled Out on MTV.
She still looks good now.
She still looks good now. She was doing Baywatch and she was like 26 at the time. And to think, only 8 years earlier, she was a dancer at Kings Island at the amusement park outside of Cincinnati. But yeah, she was doing Baywatch at the time. There's, of course, that iconic shot of him in the NWO pants with the Larry O'Brien trophy and her kissing it. And I'm like, I'm not sure which trophy's better. But of course, there's the third part, which I thought was just. I remember watching this at the time and thinking it was a weird tie-in for everything, but Dennis Rodman getting his involvement in with World Championship Wrestling, and more specifically, Hulk Hogan and the NWO faction, while the finals were going on.
And it was after Game 3 of the 98 NBA Finals, right?
Yes.
Like, basically, it was the first one, and they blew Utah out. They completely... Utah, I think, scored only like 54, 55 points. I remember watching that game thinking like...
No, that was in Chicago. No, yeah, it was in Chicago because Utah had the better record.
That was Game 3, yeah. Because I
forgot
the Jazz won the first game, the Bulls took the second game, and then how about Rodman skipping out to go wrestle with Hulk Hogan? And this was like our wrestling listeners out there, this is like the height of like wrestling. The WWF at the time, which was what it was known for, was kind of slowly but surely kind of reclaiming its glory, but WCW was running the show, and to see Hollywood Hulk Hogan and Rodman, it was just like, I remember the ESPN made a big deal about it. It was just like, wait a minute, that was like a Monday night. It was like a kind of like
because Game 3 was on a Sunday night.
Yeah, right, and it was like a Monday night, the Monday night kind of a Nitro.
Monday night Nitro.
And then, I was just like, wait a minute, did they give her permission to do this? And I was just like blown away. I was like, wow, like. Rodman, look at him. And then look, he flew back, produced in Game 4. And I'm like, I can't really be mad at the guy. I'm like, hey, man.
And to think the WCW, with all credit to Eric Bischoff and the creative team they had at the time, parlayed this into having Hogan and Dennis Rodman face off against Diamond Dallas Page and Karl Malone a month later.
Yes, that was the pay-per-view.
Yeah, the Bash at the Beach.
That was the pay-per-view in like July. Well, I mean, Rodman, I don't think I learned too much of what I kind of couldn't put together or knew about Rodman. But that was definitely pretty interesting. That was in like episodes, I don't know if it was 9 or 10. I think it had to be 9 because episode 10 was just like essentially Game 6
Oh, yeah,
basically.
Episode 10 was the coronation.
Reg, what about this? How about the flu game? Now that we know it's what would they call it now? Pizzagate?
Yeah. I will put it this way. As a former delivery driver in a college campus neighborhood in Cincinnati, we got away with some pretty nefarious shit back in the day, but we never did anything like this. Mainly because we didn't have anybody that famous come to town.
I look, we always heard about the famous flu game, whatever it was. Some people I've heard like throughout the years, some like Jordan was hungover, but I kind of found it weird, the story of Jordan's hungry. It's like 11 p.m. and I think in Utah everything closes early.
Oh yeah,
Salt Lake City, I should say. So Jordan orders a pizza. Now, first of all, he said there was 5 guys who were at the door. Now, Jordan, and this is what, his 13th year, he has to be more savvy enough not to be like, hey, Michael Jordan wants a pizza in enemy territory. Can we, and he had like Tim Grover in there with him. He had like a couple guys in there
Grover
with him.
was who answered the door.
No, but who placed the order? Because why would 5 guys, outside of like a bad porno movie, like 5 guys don't deliver a pizza to a particular person, if you know what I'm getting. Unless your name is like Jenna Jameson, I don't know, like something along that line.
Sometimes you need 5 guys to hold that big sausage.
But I'm like, is it bullshit or is it like legit?
Oh, there's definitely elements we were not told. Something tells me that with the hotel they were staying at, I'm willing to bet there was probably some kind of security breach of some sort.
Yeah, and from what I heard too, the hotel that he was saying was like some kind of 4-star hotel in Salt Lake City, but not too far from the arena. But it was kind of like, okay, so he apparently has food poisoning, which I've never had food poisoning, but I heard it's the worst. You had a little bit of it yesterday.
I had a little bit of it yesterday, not like major, but when you feel it, you feel it. Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know if I fully believe it, but I mean something happened. I mean, but I just kind of like 5 guys or. Delivering a pizza. Actually, one of the, I guess the guy who delivered the pizza went on Colin Cowherd.
Yep.
And basically, he said it was only him and another guy. I guess because I don't know if it was like when you were delivering pizzas back in, was it college?
Yeah.
He said basically like there was somebody who would go to the door, but they had a driver. They weren't like the driver. I don't know if it's done differently in Utah. I always thought the driver was the guy who delivered the pizza. That's
the way I did it.
Okay, but he said he had like a driver who would take him there, and then he was just there to like kind of hand it off. So.
But he strange.
Said, yeah, that's it's Utah. I mean, like goes without saying. But he said it was only him and the driver, so it was just kind of like there was not like 4 other guys with him. So I'm kind of like, well,
no, there's definitely something we're not told. Like, watch somebody come out next year. It's like, no, Michael Jordan had a bad business dealing with the Yakuza, so they poisoned his food somehow. Like, watch that be the story, because that would be such a Jordan thing to do.
But yeah, from what I heard, I mean, having food poisoning definitely is like, if it's not on the top of the list, is like, just like, the worst feelings. I heard like a migraine is bad too. That's why I've never gave Pippen shit about that. You remember Terrell Davis in the Super Bowl against the Packers,
right?
But the food poisoning thing, it was still a legendary game. The Bulls took him out in 6, and Jordan played his ass. He played his ass off, and but I found that to be a little interesting. I'm trying to remember what anything that comes up to you.
I didn't really know too much about Steve Kerr's dad's situation. I know it started to turn this morbid again, but
that was pretty sad. I doubt. I mean, he was in Arizona at the time, I think.
Yeah, he was in college at the time. Yeah. That's the reason we didn't hear too much about this during his NBA career and afterward, because he didn't start playing until the late '80s with Cleveland. But,
yeah, so it was interesting to see a bit of a background kind of info on some of the guys, and it's not like Kerr was like one of the 4 main guys who they did like Pippen, Rodman, Jackson, and Jordan, obviously.
Yeah, but in that era, especially in the second three-peat run, if you got the ball out to Kerr on the 3, it was pretty much automatic.
It was
going
money.
in.
How do you like to transition from Paxson, who was a dead shot from 3-pointers as well, to Steve Kerr,
who might be the greatest of all time at it up until Steph Curry?
Yeah, I mean, just from a pure, he was automatic money. I think he shot like 40%, and like I don't know if it was 96, 97, or 97, 98.
97, 98.
He shot 40% from 3, and it was just like, it's just money.
And to think he goes on to coach the best 3-point shooter since him.
Yeah, the Golden State Warriors. I mean, yeah, Splash Brothers. But a few things from. I'm trying to think of like some other stuff. Oh, we could talk about like Jordan's gambling. Or his baseball, gambling, baseball, kind of tied together.
Yeah, because they do tie together. Because a lot of people thought like this is, if you think the media is nefarious now, no, they've always kind of been that way. So Jordan had a few, high stakes bets that he made with people back around 1993 or so, mostly over golf games and stuff like that. And I thought one of the great points, I forget who exactly said it, but Jordan gambling $10,000 on a hole of golf would be like, say for example, if you and I were to play around one day, if we just bet $10 on who has the better score on a hole.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that, we all know about Jordan's kind of gambling habits, and that's fine, but I never believed this kind of this myth that David Stern wanted Jordan out of the league, and he wanted him, he was going to suspend Jordan, this and that. You throw away your biggest cash cow.
That would have been merchandising suicide.
Now, I get why the investigation happened because, Jordan wrote a check to, I guess, one of the guys that he owed money to.
Who was a known loan shark.
Who was a known loan shark. So they're kind of like, well, wait a minute. And this is not too long from the Pete Rose kind of thing going down with the Dowd report. So it's like, God forbid, and nobody's, accusing Jordan of throwing games or shaving points. But it's going to open up a lot of speculation. So I guess that's why they did their investigation. I believe Jordan. I mean, you saw him in 92. He was just visibly just tired. When he went out of his hotel room and just people just constantly waiting for him. He had gone on this kind of three-peat or two-peat at the time. I could see why he needed a break.
And they even showed during the last season that one instance of him, I think, in the hotel room where he's just laying on the couch.
That's what I'm saying. He was visibly tired. He was just like, you wouldn't want this life because it's just like...
Exactly, because you're a prisoner of your own success.
Exactly. And you just can't step out anywhere without people coming up to you and this and that and the other. So I could see on top of his success on the court, obviously his success off the court with, Nike and Gatorade and McDonald's and all that stuff, where he just kind of needed some time to just compress, just be like, okay, I'm good.
And I'm going to take this opportunity to give a shout out to Jordan's security here.
Oh, my goodness.
How good did they look in this documentary? Of course, with this being the production that it was, Jordan was going to put over the security guys, especially, now that they passed on or whatever. But you had the one dude who just gave everybody that look of don't even fucking think about it.
Yeah, and he has the greatest perm ever.
No, that was the black guy.
No, the white guy's the one with the perm. The one with the glasses.
The white guy's the one with the glasses and the perm. He was the quarters guy.
Oh, yeah, he was the quarters. That's what I thought you were talking about. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the other guy. Gus, I think his name was.
Oh, yeah, that's his guy.
Yeah,
that's his guy.
Gus was the main guy who was just who would just give everybody the stink eye if they ever try to do anything with Jordan. John Michael Wozniak was the former Chicago narcotics officer. Which would you ever guess a guy who looked like that was a narcotics officer? But anyway, no. that was the quarters guy who just did the Jordan shrug out.
That was beautiful.
That was wonderful.
That was so gold. I was just like, he just did it. He was just all right, boom.
And to think that guy only passed away less than 6 months ago. If he would have hung around long enough to see the footage of himself doing that.
See, this is exactly what I loved about the production. I'm not gonna call it documentary, folks. I'm sorry.
We both caught ourselves once on that already.
Yeah, the production is you get to see those kind of lighter sides of him and how he interacted with security. And, you see these guys who kind of became characters and I guess memes in their own way.
Yeah. He's like, security, we need to get rid of security.
and that was pretty cool. I love seeing, I'm trying to think of a few ones to go. And that's a good one. Oh, let's talk about his baseball career. So we started talking about the gambling.
Humanizing moments.
Right. We started talking about his gambling and whatnot. And as I mentioned before, it's just I could see why he needed a break to go do something else. And I truly believe him when he said, because remember, the story was after the 92 championship, he wanted to retire. He wanted to kind of go and play baseball, but because Bird and Magic, his contemporaries, never won 3 in a row, that's why he came back.
Exactly.
So I believe him when he was talking about that with his father, and he said he would have done it then had it not been
he comes back for 3. He has all the gambling media stuff he has to deal with, which drains him further, and then his father dies in the offseason, which
was murdered. I mean that in itself could look.
I'm just saying, you're dealing with all that stuff over the course of 1 year. That'd break anybody down.
That'd break anybody, yeah. And, the whole Atlantic City thing, it would I believe it was game 2. After game 2, or during game 2, he went to Atlantic City. He took a lot of, I remember being in New York at that time. That's kind of when I realized, wow, Jordan's not that bulletproof, because the New York press went at him. Now, luckily, they won game 3, and they won game 4, and they won game 5, and they won game 6 and took the Knicks out. But, you could kind of see the chinks starting to come off the armor, and kind of like, okay, there's so I could see where Jordan kind of just was like, hey, you know what? I have the opportunity to do this. I've already proven myself. I always kind of thought, though, he knew he would come back to basketball. I thought it was not a retirement. It was a break.
Oh, no. Even 8-year-old me watching this baseball thing, it's like, something just isn't right here. He's going to come back to basketball at some point. I remember being in my 3rd grade class, all us guys, we would be trading our basketball cards over and whatnot. It's like, Jordan's coming back.
Those were the days. Wasn't that so much fun?
Dude, there was a
basketball card. No, Fleer, top, upper deck, tops.
Yeah, like all the old school shit like that. Like there was a trading card collectible store right across from my one buddy's house, and we would just go over to his place, and we just whenever any of us got money, we just blow it all on.
I would same thing. Although I had to ride my bike to the trading card store. I
still have an Upper Deck magazine from February of '94,
awesome.
With David Robinson and Hakeem Olajuwon on the cover. I gotta find it somewhere, but yeah, it has all the card prices. Those of you who are collectors, who are younger, who don't know what we're talking about, just Google this shit. It's collector's paradise. If you're a sports fan, you'll love this stuff.
Glory days. So Jordan retires in October of 1993.
Yep.
And
the news actually breaks at a Chicago White Sox playoff game.
And by February of 1994, Jerry Reinsdorf, he has this press conference. I remember coming home from school and watching, I believe it was maybe the 5 o'clock news, and they had Jordan is coming back, but Jordan is coming out of retirement to play, and I'm like, oh yeah. He's like, baseball. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, huh? And then he had this press conference with Reinsdorf there, and then him in kind of the White Sox outfit. And I'm just like, holy God, is this really happening? Yeah,
and I remember they showed some reels of him working out in a gym trying to do some fielding, and him, missing a few balls. But imagine if you're the Birmingham Barons at the end of 1993. Imagine if you're a team staffer, let alone Tito Francona, or dealing with all the AA guys you're going to promote and send back down to A-ball, whatever, whatnot. Imagine if you're a team staffer, you're at the end of 93, you're thinking, okay, we're going to have another ho-hum 94 season, AA guys come through, whatever their ticket sales are going to be, if we're flat or a little bit up, that's great, or whatever, whatnot. And then you suddenly find out that the greatest athlete of this generation is going to be playing at home in your park about 50, 60 times in the next year. Press credentials, tickets, everything was sold out in no time. You had kids climbing on top of each other to look inside the fence to watch the game.
Just to let our listeners know, ESPN did do a 30 for 30 called Jordan Rides the Bus. Check that out whenever you get the chance. It'll show you a little bit more of what we're just kind of talking about, what you saw in the Last Dance documentary. That goes really fully in depth on that.
Production.
I'm sorry?
Production.
Oh, production. There you go. See, it's my Scottie Pippen right there. Or is it the other way around? I don't know. Anyway.
Well, your name comes first.
Well, I'll assume the Jordan mantle then. But check that out. Jordan Rides the Bus. It's a great documentary. It's one of the 30 for 30s that I believe in its first 2 years that came out. But, it's funny. You remember when we did our movie pod? I guess it was 2 or 3 weeks. It's 3 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago, yeah.
And when we're talking about Bull Durham, how Costner kind of looked the part of a baseball player. Now, for a guy in Jordan's case who hadn't played baseball apparently till high school, maybe his junior year, he looked like a baseball. He didn't embarrass himself. I mean, I watched him kind of run the base pass, watch him swing the bat. I'm like, oh, okay, he's got some.
He definitely had the developmental the athleticism to succeed if he had been better developed. Of course, The Tito Francona quote in there is if you give him 1,500 at bats, he maybe could have made the majors.
Now, during that season, I don't know if he played the entire season or not.
He did.
Jordan did have 50 RBIs for a minor leaguer in AA. That's pretty freaking amazing.
Especially if you consider the fact, and I love the fact that the production highlighted this, his body wasn't built for baseball, especially when the season started. Of course, he was working with Tim Grover. Tim Grover had to kind of change up the routine to make to make his body more conducive to, hitting balls and catching out in the outfield and things like that, which are very different.
Yeah, they detailed that very nicely
from what his basketball game was. So the fact that he was able to have that kind of production, be invited to the Arizona Fall League, and do that even with all the media attention he was still getting is pretty admirable. But of course, going back to what we were talking about with the security, when he was in Birmingham, he was just one of the guys.
Yeah. How exciting do you think it was for those minor leaguers to like Michael Jordan is like riding on a bus, or we're playing cards, or we're shooting pool, and just kind of hanging out. And that must have been a very humbling experience, not in a bad way, but in a good way. Kind of brings you back down. Sometimes we all need that. Just when you're kind of on this mountain, as Jordan was in his NBA career,
right,
or at least the first half of it. Throughout his own NBA career. But then you're in 4-star hotels, and you can do what you want. Like you driving for. I think he still had his Ferrari. I remember there was one clip of him, like a little kid, kind of ran out to the streets, and Jordan's in like a red Ferrari. And you can, what I loved about it, you hear the people in the back. They don't even know who the hell's like in front of them.
No, you know what I would have done if I was that kid? If I was that kid, I would just flip them all off.
Well, the kid looked like he was about 5, so I would hope
Still, I would have if I was 5.
But getting back to my point, sorry for going off of it a little bit. It must have been a very humbling experience for him to kind of be, and I think he's kind of has said it, like, it was good for him to kind of re-energize and see that passion again, and see that the way these guys work hard, and to kind of be in that environment. I think that kind of rejuvenated him to kind of want to come back. As I mentioned, I thought he was coming back anyway, but to kind of just put in the work. So that had to be just an exciting experience for him, because when you're treated a certain way as a player, and you're kind of got, I don't want to say you buy into yourself or you think of yourself very highly, but to kind of like, I don't know if they were staying in motels, but I don't doubt that they were like 4-star, 5-star hotels, like
the AA Birmingham Barons.
No. Exactly, in Alabama, and then riding on a team bus, it almost makes you feel like maybe like he was a college kid again, or maybe he, his first few years in the NBA before, like he just kind of just blew up and became this media or this mass icon, this endorsement icon, whatever you want to call it. But it was good for him, and he was like about 31 or 32.
He was 31 at the time, yeah.
Yeah, 31. So it was a good transition, I guess, for a life perspective for him.
Yeah, it helped him to get kind of re-grounded, which you kind of saw when he came back in '95.
Yeah, exactly. And he had a chance to fulfill, I guess, something that was part of a dream, because if you ever hear Jordan, he always wanted to be a baseball player. So he had that chance. So he can't ever like go throughout his life saying like, well, I wish I could have done this. So I think that energized him too. I mean, I think Jordan playing baseball was probably very exciting for him, and very fulfilling, I should say. Like especially with his dad being gone less than a year before that.
Exactly.
And then how much him and his dad loved baseball. That must have been very fulfilling for him. And then who knows if he might not have said, remember, baseball went on strike. So the minor leaguers were not, basically we're going to have a season.
No, the minor leaguers were still playing.
No. But I'm saying when baseball went on strike in '94,
right?
Because that was when Jordan, he signed a contract in February, so he played throughout the, that kind of like gave him the opening to be like, you know what? All right, I think I'm ready to come back to the NBA. Because who knows? I mean, I'm not gonna say he was gonna definitely be a. Although Francona did say if you give him 1,500 at bats, he could have probably played in the majors. I think Jordan would have eventually left, but seeing how, that kind of like. It kind of lined up perfectly, okay? Like he kind of had a little bit of a chance to kind of like honeymoon with his like first love, right? And then it goes on strike. He might have been there. Well, who knows? Maybe another year or so. Maybe finish out that. But that
does bring up an interesting point, because the baseball strike, at least in the majors, started August 12th of '94.
Exactly.
I remember that Friday. I remember actually watching Cleveland's last game in Toronto at my grandma's house. So that happens in August. So you got to figure, it's like, oh, if I don't make it to the majors, I should go back to basketball. He could have come back as early as when that season started in '94. But he waits until March of '95, maybe about, what was there, about
18 games left?
10 to 20 games left. I think 18
games,
sounds about right. 18 games left in the season. They play that first one at Market Square Arena. Then they have the loss to the Magic, and then that just lights the fire under his ass that leads to the '96 team that's maybe the greatest ever.
No, it is the greatest ever. It is the greatest team ever.
Speaking of preparations for that 95-96 team, something else I want to touch on that's, again, more on the lighter side, that offseason, right before training camp started, was when he filmed the original Space Jam.
Oh,
one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Oh, come on. Don't be a hater, man. Look, you take it for what it is.
No, I can see why he made it. I can see why it's sold. Like, if I'm a WB exec, I'm like, hell fucking yes, I'm making this movie. But
Bill fucking Murray is in that movie. Don't you fucking talk bad about that fucking movie. And yes, I said fucking.
You said it like 3 times. Yeah.
Space Jam is awesome. I was 16 when that movie came out, so I wasn't like big into cartoons anymore. Not that much. But you know what? Like, I took it for what it was. It was like, it's cool seeing Jordan there. It's like you saw like that one particular clip when they had like, it's him, it's Bird, and it's Bill Murray playing golf. Right. And then Bill Murray's being Bill Murray and this and that. And then how about when I haven't seen the movie forever, when Bill Murray is when they're playing, I guess, the Monstars or whatever, and then Bill is just doing his thing. And it's just like, Michael, he's like, just pass me the ball. I got you. And then Michael's like, we're on offense. I'm sorry, we're on defense. And Bill's like, oh, no, I don't play defense. It's good. It's good for what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know it's meant to appeal to kids and things like that. Now, granted, I remember being 11 years old in the theater with my friends seeing it, and I remember thinking to myself, of course, I didn't tell them this. I thought, this is fucking dog shit. Even 11-year-old me thought that. But anyway, so we get the behind the scenes on that. A lot of the players who came out, they would have, these very competitive pickup games like we saw in the 92 Dream Team.
I think it was, in fact, I think it was, it was, who was it? It was a Muggsy Bogues. It was Sean Bradley, Larry
Reggie
Johnson.
Miller was there.
Reggie Miller. It was a few. He had, I forgot, I don't know where they shot it. I know somewhere here in L.A. Was it Warner Brothers?
Yeah, Warner Brothers Live.
So they made like a state-of-the-art basketball court for him with like weights and stuff. And so he could
they gave him a whole training facility.
Yeah, exactly. And then he can, like, when he was done shooting, just kind of like work on his NBA body and this and that. And it was that's commitment right there.
Yeah, because his call time was 7 a.m. They'd usually wrap around 7 p.m. And of course, he's in, most of the movie. So it's not like he really had much of a break. He had a 2-hour break in the middle every day. But
how about our guy Jim Rome having that little kind of clip at the beginning? Give him a baseball bat. He needs a racket.
God. Getting strong Chris Everett vibes right now.
Oh, boy. But that was pretty interesting. Obviously, they went on to have the season that they did, which is 72 wins, 10 losses. They kind of ran through. And how about the I'm sorry,
the Gary Payton?
Exactly.
Yeah, I knew you were going there.
My whole favorite thing about that is, again, when they show Jordan these kind of moments of like, and then Jordan just kind of brushes it off with that laugh. Like, he's like,
the cackle was maybe like one of the, in terms of what Jordan did in the documentary, it might be the best. I still think the Michael Wozniak shrug is the best, like, image.
Oh, of course.
But the Jordan cackle might be the best, like, sound clip of the entire thing. When Gary Payton is all serious saying, it's like, we were in his head. We were getting to him. And then Jordan just completely disregards it. He's like, I wasn't afraid of the glove.
I wasn't concerned about the glove. He was just like, he's a good player. He's a great player. He's a great defensive player. I wasn't concerned about it. I had big things on my mind, which I'm like, okay. And how perfect was that season ending on a championship note on Father's Day?
Yeah, and it being the first one after his dad was murdered.
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. Well, since he's been back in the NBA. Well, actually, technically, yeah, because they were eliminated by Orlando in May. So, yeah. I had to rethink that one. But that was beautiful. That's one of those iconic Jordan moments, too, of him crying on the floor in the locker room, just super emotional. We'd never seen that side. I mean, we kind of had a glimpse of it when he won his first championship and he's clutching. I couldn't really tell if he was crying or not.
No, but this one, you knew what was up.
Oh, my God. It was so, and I was just like, wow, that's what a perfect way to end a season, especially with the greatest team, arguably, maybe ever in. At least in the NBA. I mean, we can kind of go like just throw around a lot of teams. We can do
a whole pod on what we think our greatest teams are.
We could throw a lot of sports teams in that, I guess. But for the NBA, and by the way, thankfully your Cleveland Cavaliers took out that BS Golden State team back in 2016, which, by the way, in itself is one of the great Game 7s ever.
Yeah, so those of you who've never been in the studio, which should be just about every one of you listening, I actually have in my apartment a framed copy of the Cleveland Plain Dealer the next day of LeBron holding the trophy from when he won it on Father's Day back in 2016, taking out the 73-9 Warriors. Which again, I still think the 73-9 Warriors weren't as good as the 72-10 Bulls. No. That's a conversation for another day. But yeah, I remember actually watching that game at JP's. That was wonderful.
That was a beautiful, beautiful game. Anyway, so let's talk about episode 10. I loved it because it was just kind of like Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals. It's just like you kind of relive it. You know, when Scotty said, like because the first 2 points that he scored, I think in the game, he kind of like jacked his back up again. And basically, he was just like a decoy the entire game. And he still played, though. So let's give Scotty some credit for that. He could have been like,
yeah, but the production didn't give him as much credit as they should have.
Which they should have.
Which if you think as much as they tore him down for, the 1.8 seconds and the 97 game and the 90 game against the Pistons, you think they probably put him over a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. And he deserved a lot of credit. Dennis Rodman showed up. He hit like a couple of big free throws, he hit like a 3-pointer. I remember watching it live. He hit like a 3-pointer and he just kind of threw his hands up and then he was, he was battling. But I love that one because it was just kind of just relived that Game 6.
Exactly, because over the course of the first 9 episodes, right, there's kind of like a Memento Godfather Part 2 type of non-linear narrative that they take it through to kind of like weave all the threads together, and then this is kind of where it all culminates.
Yes, yes.
So we knew we weren't going to be going back and forth in time much anymore, but the fact that all the storylines that have been built up over the course of these 10 episodes had kind of built up to what we knew the conclusion was going to be, but, to all the new audiences out there who didn't get to see it unfold, and to all of the people our age and maybe older who did get to watch it and get to relive just how great it was and that final shot.
Yeah, and that's iconic. I mean, it's even more so than the shot that he hit against your Cleveland Cavaliers in '89, which when he throws his hands up and he's just like that. And that is going to be the ultimate Jordan legacy pick in my mind. I mean, it was just so perfect. And especially everything that led up to him going to the basket against Byron Russell and then stripping him alone. And then basically Phil is just like, okay. I remember thinking, oh, they're going to call a timeout. But then it was just like, okay, no, just go. And he has the ball. And he's going to take the shot. And yes, people, Jordan did not push off. He did not push off. All right?
No, the defender slipped.
Exactly. No. His momentum was going that way because he thought Jordan was going to drive on him again.
Yep.
So his momentum kind of took him to the basket. Jordan crossed him over.
You don't call, even if it's not Michael Jordan, even if it's just somebody going for, a shot like that at the end of a playoff game, you don't call that offensive foul.
Well, it's not an offensive foul to begin with, but, his momentum is his hand's kind of on him, so it looks like he pushes off. But even as strong as Michael is, you're not going to get much leverage. You really have to extend. So, but that iconic in that pose, and then he holds it, and it's just like that. How about this? After they win the championship, and you said he had like a little bit of a moment with Leonardo DiCaprio, a very young Leonardo DiCaprio coming off Titanic.
Exactly.
And I think it was like Man in the Iron Mask was kind of the movie that he had at the time, because Jordan got it wrong. He said Man with the Iron Face or something that. Or something.
Which was great because somebody that attuned to being successful would have his pop culture wrong.
But how about the moment after that where they're kind of celebrating? I don't know if it's in this hotel venue. It's like a room, and Jordan's on the piano, and he's got like the press all around him, and they're taking pictures, and Jordan's just kind of he's just letting loose. It was just incredible. You remember that at the very end of episode 10? And it shows that's where we saw Carmen Electra and Dennis Rodman.
With Dennis Rodman with both his trophies.
But it's just how at peace Jordan was. He's just like boom, 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 going into the season knowing that this is their last dance. No pun intended, but this is their last ride. That is.
Yeah, and at that point, you could tell in his mind he knew it was over, and that's kind of the way he wanted to go out.
Yeah, but I thought that was a perfect way to end that documentary. Oh, that production.
No, you caught yourself this time.
Well, I've done a pretty good job. I was calling it production most of the times. I would say 80% of the times I was calling it production, but whatever. Anyway, but to see him there, obviously he can't play the piano for shit. So, but just having that press around him, and he's just like enjoying. He's basking in that success from what he went through the entire season. That was not an easy season to go through.
And I think that was the whole point of this Last Dance production. And of course, it was the great way to go out. Now, of course, much like season 9 of Scrubs, we're just going to pretend his whole run with the Wizards never happened. But an interesting, little button at the end of it was Jerry Reinsdorf saying that he would have been willing to bring everyone back for one more year.
Yeah, I found that to be very, yeah. So it wasn't. I mean, look, I don't know if this takes Krause off the hook for anything, but people were waiting. Like Reinsdorf is the owner; he could step in. Apparently, he did, and Phil technically is the guy who kind of pulled the plug on the whole thing, and I can understand why. He was not.
He was ready to move on.
He was ready to move on. The relationship with Jerry Krause had just soured completely. He was kind of like at that process. I don't blame anybody, because if you're going through that, and especially at the beginning of that season, if you tell me even if I go 82-0, I'm not coming back, I'm going to give you the
exactly.
big F you. Not I don't mean to be throwing the finger at you. I'm just like I'm a hand guy. So
I can see this. Yeah.
But I thought that was kind of like very enlightening to hear Krause say, But I thought Michael was a bit foolish to say, oh well, these guys, Krause stated that, certain guys are going to be up for certain deals, so we're not going to be able to bring them all back, especially if we're going to give Michael another $30 million for 1 year contract. So, but when Jordan is kind of like, oh, well, no, Scotty would have came back for a 1 year deal. Scotty was ready to get paid. Scotty was not coming back
at all.
And guys like Kerr and who else was it? Was it Rodman? They were I guess they were kind of ready to move on from him.
Yeah.
Kerr and who else? I forgot who else he mentioned, who he said was going to be up for a new deal, which is higher pay. But I think it was a little bit, it was not very realistic of Michael to think like, hey, because I tell him or I, say it, it's these guys are going to come back and we're all going to be like 1 year deals. Like, certain guys were ready to move on and certain guys were ready to get paid.
And even if they all would have come back, would they have won number 7? I mean, we'll never know.
No, I don't think so.
Because they wouldn't have gotten past Indiana in the East. If Miami had not been upset by the 8 seed Knicks with an Allen Houston finger roll at the end, I think Miami probably would have taken them out. And even if they would have gotten past either of those teams, it was just the Spurs' time.
Right. And granted, it was a short season because the NBA lockout.
Because the lockout happened until February.
So that would have benefited them a little bit, but I don't see them. They were, again, that team was really running on fumes. They were able, once Scotty got back into the groove, kind of put it together because they had the best record in the NBA with Utah, them in Utah, but Utah had the tiebreaker over the season. That's why they had the home court advantage. But no, they were running on fumes. I don't think another year would have, even in a shortened season, would have helped them. And certain teams were kind of on the rise. And as you mentioned, the Miami Heat, when I was living in Miami at the time, were, they're kind of ready to, they were a Allen Houston, bounce off the rim from kind of just, I think, winning the NBA championship. And then you had the San Antonio Spurs, obviously. So I don't think that happens. What about you?
What, do they win number 7?
Yes.
Oh, hell no.
Okay. All right.
They don't even make it out of the East.
So, all right. So let's kind of close this up. My final thoughts on production. There we go. My final thoughts on the production is it lived up to all of my expectations as a viewer. I got to see a side of Michael, as I mentioned earlier. He's very candid, very forthcoming about pretty much, the Jesse Helms thing, the Republican wear sneakers, the gambling thing, and just kind of just he spoke his mind. And this is something Jordan really has never done. He's as manufactured a product as anybody. We've seen it. Maybe Tiger Woods is kind of the same way. Anyway, so I got to learn a lot about that particular team. Again, if you listen to, it was episode 4 of the Chicago Bulls. It's my favorite team of all time, the 90s Bulls. So I got to learn a little bit more, a bit of a deep dive about them. So I would give it, if I was 1 to 10, I'd give it maybe a 8.5 or 9. I was
going to put it in the 8s, somewhere in there.
8.5 or 9, maybe because I'm a little bit biased because I'm such a huge Jordan fan and guy. I give it a 9. But it's definitely it's up there. It lived up to the high. I'm kind of sad that it's done. 5 weeks again has gone by so quick. So, that my final thoughts on it. Jason Air Michael Jordan did a very good job on the production. It's still resonating now because you're still seeing guys. It's been over for a week, but yet it's pretty much it's dominating a few of the sports shows out there, the debate shows and whatnot. So it has lasting impact in kind of an area that obviously in the sports world where we have nothing to talk about. So just to close up, it lived up to its hype for me, and I'm sad to see it go. I might rewatch it again on Netflix though.
Yeah, and to that, I'm pretty much gonna corroborate that as well. There wasn't really anything to me that came as too much of a surprise, right? Like my interpretations of who these people were as they were going through the championship run, and as I've seen afterward as they've been covered, nothing really was altered. Of course, Jordan's the ultimate competitor. Phil Jackson was kind of the one that kind of had the Zen master had to keep everything in place because I don't think they win 6 championships with a different coach. Krause didn't get enough credit, but he wasn't there to defend himself either. But I really like the fact that we got to see what the behind the scenes were and what the chaos can be for a successful organization. Now, imagine being a fly on the wall in an unsuccessful organization. Like say you're like taking footage of the Cleveland Browns or whatever. But from all the fun stuff we got to see with the security guards and them having to shoot Rodman out the back.
That was crazy.
Yeah, and just what these guys had to deal with Jordan being an international celebrity and all of these guys being known the same way and having to deal with the dynamics of being on a basketball team and the business of basketball at the same time. I thought Jason here did a really good job of having to manage all of that and having to whittle down all of that footage into 10 hours and dealing with what had to have been the very difficult process of dealing with Jordan's people.
Exactly, yeah. Or Jordan himself.
So, all in all, I thought it was very well done. ESPN just announced this week that they will be doing something similar for a 2021 release with Tom Brady called Man in the Arena. I think that's going to be a lot more of a harbinger of how well this format can work because presumably by then sports will be
hopefully
in full
we'll
operation.
Be back.
I said presumably. I'm not counting my chickens before they hatch. So it's going to be interesting to see how that gets thrown together. I'm not sure what kind of archival footage they have, but I think this was a good format to explore because I think there are going to be other subjects that they can do like this. And I, as a sports fan, can't wait to see what they come up with.
Yeah, I know they have some footage of Kobe Bryant during his last NBA season that without a question, will come out eventually at some point, and that should be interesting to see. Don't be surprised from 15 years from now if you see a LeBron kind of documentary as well.
Oh, I hope they interview me for that because, again, as we said on here before, I actually knew him back in high school.
Yeah, and so we're going to see a lot of these kind of formats kind of just play out within the next few years or so. And look, I'm a sucker for it. I'll watch like anything. By the way, the 30 for 30, the new one, Lance Armstrong one, is actually coming out Sunday.
Yeah, part 1 is coming out Sunday, then part 2 will be the following week.
And this Sunday, too, we have Phil versus Tiger with Peyton and Brady. I'm actually kind of stoked for that. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's not the highest level, but it's just like the fact if it would have just been Phil and Tiger again, I might have been like, okay, I'll just catch it.
No, it's content, and it could be really
exactly. Now that you have Brady and Manning, I was like, wait a minute, you couldn't have lined it up perfectly. So I'm gonna be looking forward to seeing that. I'll let you wrap it up in a second, but just Memorial Day weekend. I hope everybody out there is just going to find something to do, maybe have a picnic. I know you're going to do some kind of camping stuff.
Yeah, at least that's the plan anyway. But if you guys have any feedback for us, feel free to email us at Reggie N Regis Podcast at gmail.com. That's REGGIE, the letter N, REGIS Podcast at gmail.com. We are also on Twitter at Reggie N Regis Pod. And I understand we are on some streaming platforms as well.
Yes, to name a few, we are on Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public. We are also on YouTube, so check us out on any of those platforms. Please let us know. Any content is good content, as my compadre mentioned. Our email address. So just let us know what you think. With that being said, happy Memorial Day weekend. Look for episode 12 next week, hopefully sometime. I am Reggie. He is Regis,
and we will see you guys next week.
We are out.